Tension, good or bad? Tension at work, good or bad? Productive tension, how about the Institute for Productive Tension? Ever heard of it? Well, you are today on the HR and Leadership Spotlight Show. T Falcon Napier, welcome to the show today.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah, so I am absolutely intrigued about tension, productive tension, your Institute for Productive Tension, and I can't wait to get there. So I guess, but I really want to know, who is T? And that is it, folks. That when I say T, I'm not calling him T like TEA, like the drink with the fancy pinky.
Yeah.
And T as in golf tee, correct?
Right, exactly. T as in T-shirt. That's what we
You
say.
are T, like
one letter.
Just the
one
T.
letter.
That is
and then people going, Steve? No, just T.
I like that. Well, I'm Chuck, just the S, just the
there.
Chuck Samikian. So T Falcon Napier. I don't know where to begin, so I'm just going to turn it over to you. Why don't you introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, I'll give people a little bit of background. The Institute for Productive Tension is something that had its roots almost 40 years ago. So back in the 1980s, I was in my 20s, and I was living in Ann Arbor, Michigan at the time. And back in those days, peer group counseling was all the rage. Everyone was getting together for rap sessions, and they would get together and talk about their life's issues and problems or whatever, and try to give each other a little bit of peer coaching. Well, I was putting together a tool that I thought could be very useful for the work that they were doing. And that tool came to be called the ChangeGrid. And so the ChangeGrid is a tool I developed that helps people to look at the specific changes that they are making in their life, and it answers a whole lot of questions about their readiness for making that change, how engaged they are in making that change, the likelihood that they're going to follow through and do what needs to be done, and what type and level of support they're going to need. Well, central to this whole change grid is one little layer of it. There's many layers to it, but one little layer, and that layer is all about the level of productive tension the person has about that activity. Now, we chose the word tension on purpose because we knew people had preconceived notions about what tension means. And their preconceived notion is not wrong, it's just incomplete. So usually when people hear tension, they think stress. And it's going to be an overwhelming thing and blah, 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 and we need to do all that stress management kind of stuff. But that only tells a tiny fraction of the story. So productive tension is actually a whole range of tension, ranging from a high of stress all the way down to a low of apathy. Okay. So let me go ahead and give you the Reader's Digest Gifted Students Orientation to the 5 levels of productive tension.
Excellent.
And then we can play with this, and the listeners can apply this to their own life and see what's really going on.
Excellent.
Now, the highest level of tension is called stress. Stress occurs whenever you are in a situation where you perceive the level of challenge in the situation as being far greater than your ability to handle that challenge. And stress sounds like this. I know I need to do something, but I don't know what to do. Just tell me what to do and I'll do it. Anything you say is fine with me. Please help me. I'm out of control. Yeah. And so this person is desperate and they're reaching out, hoping that someone will throw them a life ring. Now, obviously, in the world of HR, there are plenty of occasions where you are dealing with people who are at their wits' end. And whether they're your internal customers trying to solve an issue, or they're an employee that has got some sort of an issue, they've reached this impasse and they come to you and go like, oh, well, obviously, stress is not limited to HR issues. It happens throughout all areas of life. So let's come down a little bit on the tension scale. The next level of tension we'll look at is called power stress. Power stress is a bit healthier because our perceived level of ability is slightly better than it was up in stress. Challenge is still high. Power stress sounds like this. I know I need to do something. I know exactly what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do it right now. Are you going to help me or what? So the person who's in power stress has a real sense of urgency. They know they need to do something. They know what they're going to do, and they're going to go right ahead and do it. Now, under certain circumstances, that can be very positive, very beneficial. But a flag should go up, and you should be thinking, how did they get to that decision? Is this a well thought out, well formulated decision to move forward so quickly, so definitively? Or is this an impulsive thing? Have they hurried into this? So the problem with power stress is that there is this impulsive element that we have to check in on. So again, anyone who's a human development professional who's listening to this podcast should certainly be able to think of plenty of situations where they've met people who are in a real hurry to do whatever. And on the one hand, you kind of go like, well, that's good, but review with me how you came to that decision right now.
No, I can see that. I've worked for people like that. I'm sitting in my office, a great day. All of a sudden, my boss comes up. He's like, Chuck, come with me. And we're like going for a walk, and it's like, see this, and we got to do this, and we need to fix this, and you got to put a program in place. I'm like,
yep.
Whoa, hey, how you doing this morning, by the way?
Right. We begin with hello. So
I get the power stress thing. Cool.
Yeah, so power stress. So on the one hand, we're talking about, again, productive tension. On the one hand, we know something productive is happening. People are wanting to go ahead, feel compelled to move forward. That's really a beautiful thing. But in our role as a human development professional, whether that's inside of an organization as an HR professional or as the person's manager, supervisor, or whatever, or if I'm in my outside capacity as a trainer or a consultant or a coach, somebody just needs to go, well, that's all great, but please help me understand how you came to this decision. Yes. So I know it's coming from a place of thoughtful, considerate decision making, as opposed to, I'm on my way out of stress, I found a life ring, I'm grabbing it. So we got to know what direction is the person coming from to end up at power stress.
Gotcha. Cool. Okay.
Power stress, sense of urgency, something's going to be done. The next level of tension moving down grid is power. Power is a moderate level of tension that happens when we perceive our level of ability and the level of challenge as being in balance with one another. It doesn't have to be a perfect balance, but relatively speaking. And power sounds like this. It's a bit more elaborate, but power sounds like this. I know I need to do something, but I haven't decided exactly what I'm going to do yet. So I'm going to look at all the options, consider all the alternatives, weigh out all their relative merits, and then I'll make my decision. Now, in ideal situations, after that decision is made, the person would immediately implement that decision and take action. But you certainly know, as well as everyone who's listening in on all this, that the world is, I want to say, infested with people who have made decisions that have never been implemented. So they know the right thing to do. They did all their homework. They've got every single thing they need in place, yet they don't follow through and implement. They don't take any action whatsoever. What's missing? Yeah. We're going to get to the answer to that in just a second. They're missing something very, very important in here. Nevertheless, power as a level of tension stimulates people to be into an information gathering kind of mode, very thoughtful, logical, all those sorts of good things is really happening. But that's also where analysis paralysis lives. That's also where people are often on a quest to get all the information to make a decision, where the truth is all we really need is enough information, enough of the right information, and we're good to go. So another thing we look for in power as something that we need some help around are people who get stuck in power. So how often have you dealt with a client who really should have just made the decision on this long ago? There is no more information to be gathered. You've got everything you need to know. Let's just decide it and then do it. Well, forget doing it. They haven't even decided yet, because often people will delay taking action pending the availability of more information. All right. Nevertheless, the key word there for power would be shop, consider, evaluate. Something formative is happening. Now, the next level of tension moving down grid, if you were looking at our little diagram, we're moving down on this grid, is power apathy. Now, in power apathy, our perceived level of ability is now greater than our perceived level of challenge in whatever that task happens to be. So if I said up in stress and power stress and the northern part of power, what we're looking at are puzzles that are in search of a solution, something we're trying to figure out, a problem we're trying to solve, an opportunity we're trying to pursue. There's something we're trying to figure out. Well, in the lower half of the change grid, so the bottom half of power, power apathy, and soon you'll learn apathy as well. This is where our strengths lie. This is where the puzzles have already been solved. So this is where all the stuff that we have figured out ends up living. And so power apathy, again, perceived level of ability greater than perceived level of challenge. And so it sounds like this. I know I need to do something. I just wish somebody else would do it. And so we say by definition that all forms of housework and yard work fall into power apathy.
Right, yes.
Okay, but the problem is that if we're particularly in a business setting, these are the kinds of things that we probably should delegate, but how many people really know how to delegate properly? How many people are going to delegate properly? But the even bigger problem is that there is one governing rule about human behavior, and you can take this to the bank. People pay attention to where they find their tension. And so everything that's up in stress, everything that's up in power stress, everything that's in power is demanding and getting more attention than the things that are in power apathy and apathy. So here you've got some tasks that you've completely figured out. You've developed processes and procedures and everything is all mapped out. It's no longer necessary for you to be the one who is managing that. It's time to delegate it. But because you've got all these higher tension activities that are competing for your attention, you don't have the time to delegate it. You certainly don't have the time to delegate it well. And so it ends up just sitting there undone.
Yeah.
And
wow.
they accumulate. And sooner or later, this pile of what we just, activity kind of clutter is just there. And it kind of, even though it's under you tension-wise, it's looming over you as far as you getting done what really needs to get done. So you go like, oh God, I still have to do that report. Or I still need to do.
I feel it. I feel it weighing me down right now. It just, I'm so.
Right. And while people can easily recognize experiencing it at work, keep in mind that the real change grid, if you will, this whole look at these levels of tension applies to everything that's going on in your life simultaneously. So you don't only have a whole bunch of things that are down grid that are happening in a work setting. What about all the stuff at home? Because the dishes do need to be done and the lawn does need to be mowed. But so there's always all of this stuff that's going on. Now, the lowest level of tension is apathy. And that doesn't mean you're apathetic, although you might be. Apathy just means that these activities are ones where you have so much ability. Your level of ability is so far beyond what the challenge at hand requires that these things kind of take care of themselves. They don't even merit any of your attention in your perspective. And so apathy sounds like this. Do something. I don't need to do anything. Everything's just fine. Now, that could be nothing more than denial.
You're right. That's what it sounds like right off the bat.
But nevertheless, this individual is not paying attention to those things. Well, can you imagine how often we have coworkers or even upline managers and executives that everyone else is kind of going, we really need a decision about this. We really need this to get done. We need someone to pay attention to whatever. But what if they're way down in apathy about that particular activity? They're preoccupied with everything above it in the scale of tension. And so what doesn't get done? So sometimes these things that get done are being ignored at the greater cost of everyone else being able to do whatever it is they're expected to do in the organization. And so to bring this all together in a nice little package, at all times, you are experiencing one of those 5 levels of tension about each and every activity that's happening across all areas of your life. And so if I want to get the most out of my own productivity, and this is what I was trying to study long ago, trying to figure out how do I get the greatest level of productivity out of people? How do I get people to really do the things that need to be done without me having to police that behavior or babysit them or somehow or another coerce them into doing it? Under what circumstances will someone just naturally follow through and do the things that really need to be done? I was fascinated by that. And what I ended up learning was that it's all based on the level of productive tension a person has. So now we can look at each of those 5 levels of tension and very quickly, because I kind of think of this as being a blinding flash of the obvious.
Mhm.
But there are 2 levels of tension that are simply not productive. So stress is too high to be productive. You're very
Right.
reactive, you're very active, but activity and productivity are dramatically different things. Or you're down in apathy, where you're just not doing those things because you're busy with other things. And so the productive levels of tension are about power stress, power, and power apathy. So to put this into a question that I like to ask our corporate clients is, for each of the activities that they want their people to do they believe that task is going to be best done by someone who's in power stress, someone who has not only an ability to do the activity, but feels a sense of urgency and isn't waiting for all the information, all the resources? They're ready to just get in there with whatever they've got and go and give it the best possible try they can. Certain activities inside of a business setting lend themselves very well to a power stress sort of a level of tension. Other things we want people to do really need to be in power, where people are being more intentional, more deliberate, more thoughtful, gathering the information, making the right decision the right way, not being emotional about it or whatever it is, just being really concrete. Some things we ask people to do fall into power as being the ideal location. And then other things, not so many, but some things are performed very well in power apathy. And perhaps the best example that I can give you of that is anytime someone starts, say, a new initiative, a new way of doing something.
Mhm.
Well, as they start to do it more and more and they start to figure it all out, at a certain point in time, I know the people I know at HR are kind of going like, you really should turn that into a procedure. That needs to go into a procedure manual so that everyone can do it consistently and we can
Yeah.
train people more easily going further. Could you write that up? Unfortunately, they're down in power apathy about it. So what do you think happens to their focus on writing up that
Right.
procedure while they're down in power apathy? So we say that power apathy is a great place for creating those routines, but documenting those routines,
Oh.
that's a very different activity.
Oh
Very
my
different.
gosh. This is this is to me, well, first of all, here's the crazy thing about this whole thing. To me, it absolutely makes perfect sense on one hand. On the other hand, I'm sitting here thinking, this is absolutely novel, like mind blowing to me, the way you've categorized these 5 things, barreled things down into 3, and said, this is where our focus is going to be.
Yeah.
And, I've seen DISC and I've seen Myers-Briggs and I've seen the Kellers and I've seen everything out there, from communication style to your leadership style to even the 4 grids of like the 7 habits of highly effective people
Sure,
thing,
sure.
do first things first and all this stuff. But the way you pull all this together, and you did, and you did this in the 80s too. Well, this is
Oh yeah,
not enough computer time there. So you had a lot of time on your hands, no internet.
Yeah, exactly right. And really, in recognition of all those models that you've mentioned, the ChangeGrid is actually the result of combining several hundred different models of human behavior into a single model. Now, we use it for different purposes. We don't do anything akin to personality testing. We figure the world's got plenty of those. Didn't need another one. We wanted something where we could say, instead of saying who the person is, I wanted a tool that would say how this person happens to be responding to this particular activity at this particular moment in time, because that's the moment in which I need to work with them. As a human development professional, whether I'm inside or outside of an organization, I got to meet people where they are. And I have to help them in whatever way is appropriate at that particular moment. So yeah, it's great to have an understanding of personality and all that, but that tension management thing, I don't care what your personality is, you got all 5 levels of tension that you work with. And that's what we want to do as well.
Yeah.
And
No.
so again, these models, it's interesting that while I put this together in the 1980s, without going back more than 120 years, I can tell you that back in 1908, Yerkes and Dodson proposed the inverted U theory of productivity. And they didn't label it the way we labeled it today, but they would say the same thing. If you didn't have very much, they didn't use the word tension, they used the word arousal. We can't do that today. It means different things. But back then they would talk about sensory arousal, that when arousal was very low, productivity or performance would also be very low. And when arousal was too high, productivity or performance would also suffer. So somewhere in between, we needed to have a moderate level of arousal, a moderate level, in order to be performing at our best. Now, let me give you a real glimpse into what's wrong with the world today, and why, by the way. I say this as a joke, but I really do mean it.
Yeah.
Those of us that are business consultants need never worry about our livelihood, because companies, large and small, do not get what I'm about to say. And until they get it, they will always need the services of an outsider to come in and try to fix what's going on. Now, why do they need an outsider? But because, for reasons I think would be a whole podcast all by itself, they don't seem to listen to the people inside of their organization who have been telling them the exact same things for months, if not years. And so here's where we get into that. It does the company no good to move people up into stress. So if you are so demanding, or the way that you treat your people, if the culture of the organization is one that is constantly keeping people on edge, in fear for their future or whatever, you've just moved people up into stress, and they cannot be up in stress and be productive at the same time. So once you're beyond a certain level of tension, once you hit stress, the level of productivity takes an immediate definitive nosedive. They're now preoccupied with survival, or they might be preoccupied with revenge, but they are not preoccupied with the work that needs to get done. On the flip side of things, we've got a whole lot of people that are down in apathy, and they represent the greatest opportunity for companies to grow, but the company's greatest blind spot. So here goes. So apathy again, the person has an extremely high level of ability to do the task, and they do not find the task very challenging at all. They can do it very easily, not quite in their sleep, but certainly while they're dozing off at their desk. So now, because of that, they don't get very much attention. They're not drawing any attention to themselves. Probably without putting any real effort into it, they can meet their minimum performance standards. And so everything on their evaluations are adequate, meet standard, it's all very at the radar, below the radar, They don't get any attention. No one notices them. Unfortunately, being downgraded represents untapped potential. And until we give some attention to those people that are down in apathy, and we don't recognize that what that person is missing is meaningful challenge. They got all the ability, they don't have enough challenge to get them engaged. They're going to end up wallowing down there. Now, why do companies allow that to happen? Because companies pay attention to where their tension is. And that means all the people that are up in stress, and all the problems that are up in stress, and all these distractions, and all these whatever, are consuming all of their energy. And by the end of the day, they run out of time, they run out of energy, and their greatest asset is being ignored. And by the way, the only way those employees got to apathy was because the company gave them all the training, all the support, all the experience. The company has invested heavily in order for these people to end up down in apathy, yet nothing is being done in order to get the greater level of productivity out of them. I'll share with you one story. I had a Fortune 500 client who was being absorbed by an even larger Fortune 500 client. And as part of that absorption, the absorbed company was told two things. Number one, You can no longer make cold calls for building your business. You have to only work with referrals from our existing customer base, which was vast, but nevertheless. And the second thing is that we're putting a freeze on hiring. Now, while we are telling you you can't build your business the way you've been building it for at that time, the company was over 100 years old, and you can't hire any new people, but your quota remains the same.
Mm-hmm.
And so they had no choice but to go to all their veteran performers and see what they could do to get these people re-engaged, to get these people challenged again, stimulated again in order to do that. They found out that in far less time that they could hire and train someone new, they were able to get that much of an increase in productivity plus from their existing people. All they had to do was pay a little bit of attention to them.
Yeah.
And so one of the biggest lessons is that it is very common for corporations, whoever you want to lump into that category, they ignore the people in apathy because the people in apathy aren't demanding any attention. And so there you go. Now, I'm going to make that situation a little bit worse. And now we're going to talk about hiring practices.
Sure.
So
yes, I was going to ask you about how that could overlay on this. So thank you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's a really, really big deal because interestingly enough, companies do all kinds of things in the name of hiring. There's all kinds of testing and interviewing and all. It's all fine. But what it boils down to is that we tend to give preference in hiring to candidates who can report and document a high level of ability and a low level of challenge. So if you can show me a proven track record that you have done what we want you to do, and you've done it very, very well for a long time, I may very well give preference in hiring you because I want someone who can start, quick start, be reliable, whatever. Unfortunately, what I've actually done is imported one company's apathy into my own company.
Mm-hmm.
So for a little while, yeah, they'll be more energized because it's new people and it's new ways of doing things and on and on. But predictably, before too very long, that person's going to go like, this is exactly what I was doing before. And I was disengaged then, and I'm disengaged now.
Yeah.
And so I say, do you really want to import apathy into your company? Or who should you hire? Should you hire the candidate who's in power stress? And by the way, the ChangeGrid has not been validated for pre-hiring purposes. Mm-hmm. We would never allow it to be validated for such purposes. No one should be making a hiring decision off of any instrument, let alone, one magical one. But nevertheless, there's an insight that could be gained. And we do, by the way, teach people how to use the principles of tension management without the tool. So even in an interview dialogue, I can figure out where someone is as far as levels of tension go without them filling something out that could then open up a whole can of worms. So, but if I find out, hey, this person doesn't have a lot of ability, but they're very eager to learn, they see the challenge, they're excited by the challenge, that would be power stress. Or the person who's in power who says, I've really been looking things out. I understand your company. I understand your marketplace. I understand what's going on. I know a bit about your products. I know what skills are involved. They sound like they're very much in power. Or we could even have a candidate in power apathy who says, yeah, this is something that I've been doing in kind of like the number 2 position. I'm ready to be the number 1. My current employer is, I think, kind of holding me back because there's no place to advance me to. Interestingly enough, when I say advance, I move people down.
Yeah.
But advance me to. And so I think about that. I say to people, do you, as that company, the owner, the whoever, do you want to bring into your company someone who is in stress? They'll say, oh, no, I can't handle that. We got enough of that already. So they need too much work. They need too much help. We're not ready for that. Good. How about power stress? How about power? How about power apathy? Which one do you think in the long run has the potential for being the kind of employee you want most?
Mm-hmm.
Well, depending on the business, we would probably say maybe power, maybe power stress. It really depends how technical things are. Something like that is a license required, something like that. But I don't really know that I want someone who's in power apathy. Mm-hmm. And I certainly don't want someone who's in apathy. Nevertheless, if we did a study of the hiring decisions that most companies make most of the time, they will give preference in hiring to the person with the proven track record of success in whatever the activity happens to
Oh
be.
yeah, absolutely. You know, I have to tell you, and I've been in HR 20, 25, heck, almost 30 years now, maybe more. And I've been in operations management in the same time frame. Everything that you say is absolutely true on my side of the well, I guess you say on my side of the world. You know, I'm doing consulting now, but I've been an HR director for
Yeah.
years, and I've seen this, and I've seen where I run you know, you run the job ad, you bring people in, and you have hiring managers like, no, I need someone that is exactly doing this, this. I'm like, but this is a really good person. They've done
Mhm.
some of that, and they have that energy. Oh
Right.
no, they don't have exactly what I need. I needed. I'm thinking, all right, okay, but you could teach them this if
That's
they have
right.
that eagerness
That's
and they
right.
have the experience, they have the base things. And the
Mhm.
other thing that I see, T, is I know people that have worked for companies where it is absolute stress. And I was just having this conversation with someone today. And I said, I can't, I said, there's just something wrong with that company. I mean, there were so many good things
Mhm.
and good people,
Mhm.
but the leadership is so demanding,
Yeah.
and they're not bad people. They're just, it's just on, and it's causing people that work there this,
Right.
and
Right.
eventually they make mistakes, you know,
Yep.
big mistakes that they probably wouldn't normally make.
Correct.
They start to lose interest, and then they start to lose effectiveness, and then they just either fall off or get fired, and
Right.
then management so bring someone in. We need to bring people in here that can do the job. And I'm
Right.
thinking, well,
Right.
we
Right.
just
Right.
had someone, and we just had someone before that. We just had someone before that. Now I can put a framework in my
Mhm.
mind
Mhm.
around that. But how can you get a company like that with an owner
Yeah.
that is in that high stress
Yeah.
all the time? How do you get them to reflect? And I know you use the oracle, the self concept
Yeah.
when
Yep.
we
Yep.
were
Yep.
talking about your
Mhm.
background, but how do you get them to
Right.
do that,
Yeah.
to
Well,
understand that?
two things. So first, I think it's interesting to explore why is it, as you've characterized it, you've got a company where people are they're good people. They don't want to stress everybody out. That wasn't their real intention. They just need to get the productivity. So how is it these people that are otherwise really good people end up doing things that end up raising everybody else's level of tension up to this stress level, breaking point kind of a thing? And the answer for that is that in order for you to do the best job of managing and leading people, you need to be at and stay at a certain level of productive tension. So you can't manage and lead people well if you're up in stress.
Mm-hmm.
You can't manage and lead people well if you're in power stress, because your sense of urgency, your impulsiveness is just going to raise tension without content.
Yeah.
So if you want to manage people well and lead people well, you as the manager absolutely positively must keep yourself in power, where you're being thoughtful and considerate and deliberate, etc. Because if I recognize I'm in power, again, I'm the manager and I'm in power, being thoughtful and considerate, all this, and I go like, I need to get the level of tension raised in my team because they need to pick up the pace. They need to really get moving. They really need to do this. They need an increase in that level of productive tension. I have to be very careful, very calculated in exactly how I'm going to do that and by how much I'm going to do that. So some of the things that I may choose to do without being thoughtful could be threaten their jobs, yell at them, call them names, all these kinds of things. It would certainly throw up yellow flags, if not red flags, in the world of HR. Nevertheless, they routinely happen. It's not coming
I've
from a
seen
place
it.
of power where they're being thoughtful and considerate. They're up in stress. The managers are up in stress. And so they're being highly reactive, emotionally ruled. Anger, grief, and fear are running their decision-making process. And so all this is coming out. But it's really their level of tension speaking. It's not their heart speaking. It's not even their head speaking.
No.
It's all that. And so what we have to do when we're watching that pattern happen is we need to first of all make sure people understand these 5 levels of tension, and they're straightforward enough to learn. You can learn them in 5 minutes flat, and you can spend a lifetime really getting expert at the whole sort of a thing. But anybody can learn it in a handful of minutes, and then just say to them, your opinion doesn't matter. The fact is that these levels of tension do exist. Your employees are experiencing these levels of tension, as are you. What level of tension do you need to be at to do that particular task best? And then in turn, assuming that task is managing another, where do they need their level of tension to be? And once you have the answer to this, well, then certainly there is what we call a set of ChangeGrid maneuvers. There's a very finite set of tension management techniques that you can use to raise tension, lower tension, increase drive, reduce drive, whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. But being reactive, being up in stress, I'll throw something out for everyone. No doubt most of the people who are listening to your podcasts or watching your webcasts are parents. They have to know that you don't parent effectively if you're up in stress as the parent. If you're stressed out, if you're angry or whatever, this is not the time to be disciplining your child, because things are going to be too reactive, too emotionally ruled. And in the long run, you can cause far more damage. And all you were really trying to do is correct a behavior. And so we need to make sure, whether we're talking to leaders in an organization or parents at home, that you know the first thing you need to do is to get yourself down into power, where you can be very thoughtful and considerate and whatever. One of the very simple techniques that we teach to any manager whenever they're getting upset is, it's time for you to stop talking and start asking questions. So because obviously the people have done whatever they've done, because at the moment they did the best they could based on the information they had available to them and how they processed that information. So maybe if they'd been given additional information, other information, different resources, other resources, they might have chosen to do something else. But you didn't hire stupid people.
Right.
So they did whatever they did because at the time, based on what they had available to them, it seemed to be the right thing to do. So you need to understand how they came to make the decision that they made, not just tell them that they're wrong and to go and fix it. So, if they were wrong, how do you expect them to fix it until you get the idea? It's just kind of like we go, start asking questions, because people in power are in an information gathering mode. And so they want to learn, they want to explore, they want to understand.
Yeah, this is great. I got to tell you, we're running up against our time, and I'm going to want you to, would you come back at some point in time?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
A little deeper in here.
Sure.
But I want to ask you, and I'm going to, there's so many questions I want to ask you, so that's why I got to have you come back, but let's just keep it this way. How could you help someone, and how could they get hold of you?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because we offer tension management training, if you will, on a lot of different levels. There's a different answer I would give if it's an individual who wants to learn how to manage their own level of productive tension and do a lot of self-coaching and things like that. We certainly have something for them. In fact, it's free if they just go to ChangeWorksSystem.com. So again, that's ChangeWorks with an S, system with an S. So that's 2 S's in a row. ChangeWorksSystem.com. They can learn a lot about the different membership tiers and things like that we offer, but one of them is absolutely free for people to be part of the community. But we also offer training for human development professionals, specifically coaches, consultants, trainers, individuals like that. We even offer full certification in tension management, et cetera, for them. And so that information is also at Change ChangeWorksSystem.com. We kind of consider ourselves at this moment to be mostly retired, so we tend to want to hand off whatever corporate opportunities come our
No,
way.
T, don't go. Don't go.
Yeah, look, it's fine. but we're more at a place in our business that we would much rather route those corporate opportunities to all the individuals that we've
Sure.
certified, because we kind of think of ourselves as being in the autumn, early winter of our business career. I mean, I've been doing this for 40 years, but a lot of them are in the springtime and the early summer of their careers. We'd much rather help them develop those relationships. Yeah, exactly. And so we'd rather do that. But that being said, we do still have some clients who didn't get the memo that we were mostly retired and still call us all the time. So we're happy to help them. But that tends to be it. We have individual clients, we have professional certification opportunities, and we do still have some work with our corporate clients. All of that can be learn more. You can learn more about it at ChangeWorksSystem.com.
That's awesome. So, yeah, I want you to come back. The audience wants you to come back. I can hear them now screaming for more. They're going crazy. Yeah, this has been absolutely fascinating. Folks, if you're trying to figure out what's wrong with your company, you're running your company, you're running your department, you may be running it in stress. You may be running it from a power stress perspective, or you may be running it from an apathy or a power apathy perspective. So I'm going to have the way to get hold of T in the show notes, how to get hold of T's, I guess, minions of consultants and certified folks. And I'm sitting here thinking, maybe that's something up my alley, because this really resonated with me, T. I love the perspective. I love the structure that you put everything in. And I know based on the notes you sent me that there's so much more that we can talk about. Is there anything else I've missed before we go?
No, just the thought I always want to leave everyone with is singular, and that is pay attention to tension. At all times, when you're going about your day, just stop for a moment and go, what level of tension am I experiencing? What level of tension is this person I'm talking to experiencing? And if you can just become a little bit more aware of the tension that is all around you, it becomes that much easier for you to respond when you think, oh, that person is doing it. No, that's just their tension talking to me. And so I think that's the message. Pay attention to tension for yourself and others. You'll become that much more insightful because of that.
Yeah, awesome. Productive tension, the Institute for Productive Tension. Who knew? Well, we know now, folks, on the HR and Leadership Spotlight Show. Thanks for joining us, and thanks, T Falcon Napier.
Thanks so much. Take care, everyone.